to welcome everybody. This is Scott Marble. I'm the chair of the School of Architecture. I saw some of you at the session last week, but it's great to have you back in this session. And I know you've also been attending other special sessions on specific topics both yesterday and today. So hopefully you're getting all the information you need about the school to make your decision. So I'm going to flip over to my slides, and what we're going to do in this session is that we're going to focus on career opportunities and job search support that the school provides you when you come to Georgia Tech. And we have a great group today to talk to you about these topics and also to answer any questions that you have. So I will be obviously part of this. Adriana Perez Leyva is an alum from a couple of years ago and was very active in the school and is now at HKS Architects in Miami. We'll also be joined by James Kramer, who's a lecturer at Georgia Tech and is very involved in teaching courses on the business of architecture and on the profession of architecture. And he's the former chief executive of the AIA. And also David Yoakum, one of our professors of practice from Georgia Tech, who also is a founding partner of a fantastic design firm in Atlanta called Buildings. So I know I just introduced them, but I'm going to let each one of them just say a couple of words about themselves, and then we'll go into the slides. And so why don't we start, David, if you want to say a couple of words before we start the slides?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Really happy to be here and talk about what are potentials for you after graduation from Georgia Tech. I've been a practicing architect for about 25 years, and I've taught at Georgia Tech for 15, and I focus on graduate level advanced studios regarding sustainability topics.
Great. So Adriana, do you want to say a couple of words to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Adriana, everyone. Congratulations on getting admitted to Georgia Tech. I absolutely loved my time while I was there, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world. I'm excited to explain to you all the kinds of opportunities that Georgia Tech offered me, which eventually led to the job I have right now with HKS Architects.
Okay, great. And then finally, James Kramer, you want to introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll go into the slides after that, Jim.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. And the best of the day to each of you. Wish we could all be together in the same room and sharing stories and talking about the future. I was publisher of 4 architectural publications and in firm management before I came to the AIA as their chief executive officer. I was the publisher of Architect Magazine, the AIA Journal, and Design Intelligence, and something called Architectural Technology that was folded into Architecture Magazine. And with Dr. Jonas Salk of the Salk Institute in La Jolla, California, we founded the Design Futures Council, and we look at the future of the profession, how to anticipate the future, how not to be victims, but victors of a new reality. And so that's how I come to this.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide, Jim. So the slide's up talking about our career fair and building careers.
Well, in spite of the difficult turbulence that we're in right now, I am pretty, let me say, strategically optimistic about the future of the profession. I encourage our students not to be blindly optimistic, but to be strategically optimistic and to understand not how important it is not to just be kind of have simple associations of being positive, not just not just being positive, but really understanding why there are reasons to be positive, and then how to monetize the talents that you have. I've been a big fan of Georgia Tech ever since my days as the founder and publisher of Design Intelligence, not just because it's a selective school, but I do believe that the students who are graduating are going to be in the top 20% of the profession down the road. And in the big picture, the whole Georgia Tech Institute has an acceptance rate of low 20s, mid 20s, something like that. And in design, we have kind of an outlook of how to win the future, how to be strong in spite of the setbacks. And those setbacks, by the way, are things that we anticipate when we go through our class on the business of design and making money in architecture. Scott?
Yep. And the practicum program, I'll just say a couple of words about that. The practicum program, I think you were introduced to, all the students were introduced to last week, but we do a lot during your time at the school to prepare you and to set up opportunities for you to do whatever you want to. And the practicum program is the program that connects you with firms around the country, not just in Atlanta. We have a huge network of firms in Atlanta, but the practicum allows you to have week-long experiences in top design firms around the country, and you can see some of those firms listed here. And this list is always growing and it's always evolving, but these firms love the students and they have great experiences and often go back and work for them in the summer or after they graduate. And then in terms of entrepreneurship, Jim, if you want to talk a little bit about that, our kind of approach toward entrepreneurship in the school.
Yes, thank you. So entrepreneurship is really important, and here we're talking about the blending of business and of talent in the world of architecture, and blending these together in a high energy ecosystem that creates new value in the future, new value propositions for the clients. Now, some architects are going to be developers, some are going to be interior designers, some of them are going to be running design build operations, some of them will be educators, some of them will be in urban design. The list goes on. And the resiliency of the professional in these different options of service is a key to understanding where the profession is going, and then going, I don't want to just say where the money is, but going where the opportunities are. And so when we think of our role as a professional, think of our role as with the responsibilities that we have. You don't go into this profession expecting it to be easy, but it's the challenges are very rewarding. They have been in the past. It's been one of the great professions, and I think as we look at the future and kind of add things up, stack things up, there are some reasons to get pretty excited about the future.
Okay, great. David, do you want to talk about about Atlanta a little bit and some of the architecture firms in Atlanta?
Sure. Atlanta is amazing to me. I moved here 24 years ago, and it's been transformed. When I moved here, we had just celebrated the Olympics in 1996. And since that time, the architecture landscape has really exploded, as has the actual landscape of Atlanta in terms of buildings built and resuscitation of areas of downtown. It's amazing to me that we have almost 290, almost 300 firms in the city. Given the strong relationship that Georgia Tech has with the city of Atlanta and the firms, because so many principals of firms in Atlanta are graduates of Georgia Tech, it's an incredible landscape to graduate into, because you have approximately 4 firms for every graduate that you can apply to. And that's just within the strict traditional discipline of architecture. There are a lot of variations in terms of where you can take your degree. So Atlanta is not just a city in the Southeast or nationally, it's an international city. And I think that's what's exciting about growing into it after graduation. What makes Atlanta exciting now is that even though we do have a trouble spot in our economy in this pandemic, Atlanta is incredibly resilient and it's positioned to recover very well from this period of time. It's not just a thriving workplace, but it's a cultural workplace. You can see the Civil and Human Rights Museum on the right. It's also a hotbed of sustainability. We just completed one of the leading sustainability buildings in our nation, the Living Building on the left on the campus of Georgia Tech, which was truly a collaboration of professionals, academics, and researchers. So Atlanta has an incredible groundwork in sustainability and in resiliency for graduation, which in your terms would be 2 to 3 years or more down the road.
And I think you also saw this slide in the previous presentation, but just I think relative to this topic on careers and job search and job placement, I mean, the one thing that Georgia Tech has, no matter what happens with the economy, is high rankings in very many categories that firms really care about. And you'll see that the categories in the design intelligence rankings here, construction materials and methods, healthy built environments, practice management, research, design technologies. These are all topics, educational and professional topics that we rank in the top 10. And this is very important to firms. This really positions you and gives you a stable credential upon graduation to go into firms, and those firms know, coming out of Georgia Tech, what to expect from our students, and our students are very highly recruited, really around the world. Adriana, do you want to talk a little bit about talk a little bit about, maybe the career fair and, how you start your professional network at Georgia Tech?
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. So it's true. As a student, it's important that you already start, training your networking skills so that by the time you graduate, you're all the more prepared to do so. And as David touched upon, luckily Georgia Tech has a really strong relationship with local firms, which makes, these professional calendars all the more possible. So I met professionals throughout my time at Georgia Tech, and they were from all walks of life, working in all sorts of projects. In career fair, I met them during studio project reviews, during lecture series, firm tours, student organization events. And, in fact, I met the HKS office manager of Atlanta. He was a guest speaker in one of my classes, and little did I know that at that time, that networking opportunity led me to the position I hold today in HKS Miami. So the professional networking opportunities at Georgia Tech are numerous. Of course, the focus for all of you, my advice is, don't just go for professional networking just to get a job, but take it as an opportunity to get inspired, to meet amazing individuals that are doing the type of work you wish to do someday, and to have an idea of what kind of trajectory you want your career to take.
That's great. Okay, so those are really just some kind of highlights and talking points that can kind of lead into our Q&A session. And we really want this to be very much, we want for you guys to start asking questions now, and we are here to answer the questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll go back to our live faces, and we'll start the Q&A session. So please feel free to let the questions start. I'll open them up. Okay, I'll start with the first one here. We have a question. What is the kind of pay range one should expect to step into as an MArch graduate student, and what could be the average one should expect. Adriana, why don't you, I mean, you were not that long ago, you were in the market. So what were you hearing when you were interviewing?
I was hearing between like 48 to 55 would be the range. And, you know, I think those are pretty fair numbers. Of course, that depends greatly on where you're going to apply for a job. Like if it's in Atlanta, you might have an offer that's very different from, you know, maybe a small town in another state. So that's, you know, I don't know if you have heard different numbers, but that's.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers that, you know, it also depends on experience. If you have some experience,
Absolutely.
that increases. I mean, I would say in our firm, I should also mention, I didn't mention in my introduction, but in addition to being the chair at the school, I'm the founding partner of a practice in New York City. And we hire students all the time. Yeah, I would say it's between 50 and 60. Now, in all fairness, that might change a little bit in the current climate because of the slowdown. But I would tell the students that are coming into the school right now, you know, this is gonna blow over. I mean, it's gonna take a year or two, and it's gonna hit the economy. But by the time you guys are out on the market looking for jobs, it's going to be a different context than it is right now. So I feel confident that the economy will rebound, the profession will rebound, and you'll have a lot of opportunities. Here's a question about the practicum program relative to the MSUD program. So the MSUD, the Master of Science in Urban Design, I can answer that one. We also place students from that program and also from the Master of Science in Architecture in the practicum program. So, you know, the practicum program serves any student, graduate, undergrad, or even Master of Science students. Any students that's interested, we find firms. The reality is we have way more firms that want our students than we have students to offer. So the opportunities for the practicum program, because we're dealing with firms all around the country, you know, is quite large. Here's another question. What is the procedure to enter into the practicum program? And is there space for all students interested, or is it more of a for select students only? I can answer that too. It's open to all students, as I just mentioned. We do require that you submit a portfolio and a resume, and that the quality of the portfolio and resume is at a level that we feel comfortable you going out to a firm. So in some ways, it helps you kind of prepare yourself for a job in the summer or a job upon graduation, because you get feedback from faculty when you apply to the practicum program. If your resume is not up to par, or if it's not formatted right or whatever, we'll give you feedback. You can resubmit, and then almost always when you resubmit, we accept all the students. So it is competitive, but most students get accepted into the program. So here's a question. Post-MArch graduation, after graduation, when can one apply for registration to practice as an architect? Does somebody else want to take that one? David?
Yeah, I can take that. So you can earn credit, as it were, for practice during school, during internships, and that all counts towards your licensure. And so upon graduation, you will most likely have more time that you'll need to work before you can sit for an exam. And then once you complete your exams, of course, then you can become licensed. I would say that most people don't rush towards exams. Most people get a lot of good experience at different firms, doing a lot of different things, and sit for their exams well after they've accrued hours. It's really about experience in the marketplace that prepares you for those next steps. Scott, I did want to say one thing about the practicum program.
Mhm.
One thing that's distinctive about Georgia Tech is that we have portfolio submissions every year. It's a requirement. And so you are turning in your work in a portfolio format all throughout your education. And it's an excellent practice because you're constantly getting feedback. And by the time you're ready to apply for a summer position after first year or second year, third year, you've really got a good portfolio ready. It's not something that you just confront upon graduation.
That's a really good point. Here's a question, Jim, that would be perfect for you. What kind of business classes are available for students?
One of the important aspects of an education is to understand the boundaries and the opportunities. And the business of architecture class, we think, is very important to bring a balance of strength into professional practices. Sometimes we hear that professional practices are not very well run. I serve with the experience of being on the boards of 2 large firm practices, 2 medium-sized practices, about 100 to 150 each, and then 1 small practice, only 8 people. And these places are rich for the interpretation and the moving forward with solutions, new value propositions. And so at Tech, the business of architecture becomes important. So we're not just building, but we're building with a perspective, creating with a perspective of health and wellness, but also sustainability. And we keep metrics on, I'll make this short, but we keep metrics, which I'd like to show each of you sometime in the future, on revenues per full-time staff, on what people are making, what the profitability levels are, what the bonus targets are, what the schedule of bonuses are, and then what the CEOs of these practices also make all around the world. And we're fortunate to have the participation of several hundred firms on the collection of data. And we bring all of that to our classroom at Georgia Tech. So it's, and it's fun, by the way. Ask Adriana. The business of architecture is fun.
Yeah, I would say to that question, Jim is talking about the business of architecture. That is literally the name of his class, and it's a class that we've been teaching for about 3 or 4 years now, and it's gone from, I don't know, it started at like 10 students. It's an elective, and now it's we can't find a room big enough because it's so popular among students. And that's just one of a couple of other classes that we have related to different aspects of the business and the profession of architecture. But Adriana, can you talk to us briefly about your experience in that class and like what it opened up for you that you just didn't know about when you were studying architecture?
Yeah, so I was actually in that 10-person
Oh, you were in the first class.
initial class. Yeah, the guinea pigs.
Okay.
And man, I loved it. It's, throughout my education, I was always curious about the business aspect. I'm like, well, okay, it's great if, we're taught how to design, but how do I keep a business running? And it was almost like God said, like when I saw this business of architecture class added to the curriculum, I jumped on it. And it really, just as Jim had mentioned, it taught me all these financial formulas that are necessary to understand in order to, know your next move, have an understanding of how the market is going, how the market fluctuates and how to respond to that. And even in my experiences, I've interned with several kinds of firms from small to large. And in each experience, I've been able to call back to something I learned from that class, and it just further reinforces your understanding of eventually, if you do want to become an entrepreneur and start your own firm, you're a lot more confident to do so.
That's great. So the next question here, you said that it is important to start networking early. What do you consider good networking? So David, I'm gonna pass that one to you.
Sure. Networking, everything is networking. That's what I would say. It's social, it's business, it's personal. I think while you're in school, there are a few things you can concentrate on. One is networking with your fellow students. What you find in school is that your fellow students sometimes teach you more and give you exposure to things that you ever get from faculty. That's key. Is be an active member of your class. And that can be just personally or in terms of leadership in your class. Other parts of networking are through local and national organizations such as AIA, American Institute of Architects. There are always events and lectures and mixers to go to. And the sooner you start, the sooner you understand what the landscape of architecture is in the community. And that's invaluable. And that ties into what Adriana was talking about, which is when you go to a job fair, you may already know some people because you've met them socially. But when you go for an interview, you might be surprised who's in the room because you might know them or two of them already. And networking is just really being open-eyed and open to new experiences. And we want to start that as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit to that. And David and I, from our positions as founding partners in small architecture firms, it doesn't stop. You have to continue to network. I mean, you sustain a business. I've had my office for almost 30 years. David's a little less, but you maintain a business by networking. And the question is like, what is good networking? Good networking, I would say, is networking that results in long-term relationships that you can call on sometime in the future. Networking is not a short-term thing. You have to do it you have to sustain it and maintain it because whatever connection you make in school might not pay off for 5 or 10 years. It might not pay off until you're well into your professional career. So I would say one thing that's really critical about networking is it's not a short-term thing. It's not an in and out thing. It is a sustained thing that you do throughout your career.
Yeah, if I could just a small anecdote. Last Friday, I had a Zoom call with 33 of my classmates from my graduating class of architecture school. And some of them I had been in contact with, and some of them I hadn't seen in over decades. And what's amazing is that I had connections with many of them professionally. And I know that while that was fun socially, it will also probably result in other things down the road. It's about relationships, and Scott's exactly right.
Yeah, actually, I'll give a little anecdote that actually is helping our firm right now. So I practice with my spouse, Karen Fairbanks, and there is a project that we literally just got. I mean, this is like a tough time to be getting a new project, but we just got a new project because one of her close friends from college, who is not an architect, has decided to build a house in upstate New York. And so, it's, like I said, not a lot of people are starting work right now, but because of that relationship that's been maintained for 30 years, at this point, we're now getting a project in our office out of that. So you never know where these relationships are gonna pay off, but they will. So here's a question: what do you estimate is the percentage split between graduates who stay in Atlanta and those who move elsewhere? And a follow-up question: how strong is the network beyond the Southeast? I can start that, and then you guys can fill in. I would say I don't have the exact numbers in terms of who stays in Atlanta, but I can tell you that a lot of people do stay in Atlanta, and a large part of that is because there's just so many job opportunities. I mean, I mean, like I think I mentioned this, but last year when in the graduating class, I had firms coming to me saying, I need 3 people, I need 4 people, and we could only provide 1 or 2. So just the sheer quantity of jobs in Atlanta make it very appealing to our students to at least start their career here. Now, what a lot of people do is that they'll start their career in Atlanta, get 2 or 3 years of great experience, and then go off to another part of the country. And that's a great model. Um, in terms of the network beyond the Southeast, it's I would say that that's something we're working on aggressively now. The practicum program is intended to tailor that. But a lot of our faculty have relationships and connections to firms around the country, number one. And number two, our alumni network, which is huge, they're all over the place. And so, we can all, like, if you decide, look, I want to go work in Denver, Colorado. Well, you know what? There's a half a dozen alumni working in Denver that we can connect you with. San Francisco, same thing. Seattle, LA, wherever you want to go, there, I can guarantee you that we have alumni there. So the network beyond the Southeast is really driven by our extensive alumni kind of network.
If I could add to that, you also, in Atlanta, there's a lot of international firms. So you may meet a firm, like, for example, in my case, HKS, and I knew I wanted, after graduating, to move back to my hometown in Miami. So I applied to firms that had offices in Miami. So there's also that route that one can take, is like actively looking around and seeing, well, what office locations do firms have? And maybe start from there, just meet someone in Atlanta and then eventually have them refer you to someone in that office location.
Yeah, just to build on what Adriana said, Atlanta, it has almost 300 firms. Atlanta, just because of its kind of strategic geographic location in the center of the United States, but also with the largest and busiest airport in the world. I don't know if you've heard that, but Atlanta has the busiest airport in the world. What that means is that from Atlanta, you can get to anywhere in the world very quickly. And so a lot of firms locate a hub in Atlanta to do international work. And so that's one reason why I think Atlanta has a much larger percentage of large firms than comparable cities of equal size. It has to do with its strategic location in the Southeast, but also with its kind of ease of connection to cities around the world. Here's a quick question about the practicum. When do you apply to the practicum program, and is it in both the spring and the summer? The practicum is only in the spring. It takes place during spring break. Right now, we don't have a program in the fall, but it's something we might consider. And you apply for it in the fall. And in the summer, we don't have the practicum, but usually students just get summer internships with firms in the summer. So the practicum really is only the spring break program. Okay, here's a question. As working professionals, what would you guys say is the difference? Would say the differences are in working at a big firm or a small firm? Actually, Jim, do you have any input on that? Because you know more firms than any of us.
Well, I've had an opportunity to visit firms all around the world and of all different sizes. The small firm can be an excellent place to practice, and some people prefer medium and large firms. Sometimes these firms are very well managed and offer up opportunities for challenges and professional growth that sometimes the small firm doesn't offer. But I interview people around the world, and two things that come out is that Georgia Tech graduates tend to be really appreciated in firms of all sizes. And I would just like to add to something that was said a little earlier and that is that the communication skills, and I think part of this is the communication skills that come out of our studio classes. But there's an appreciation of the students that graduate from Georgia Tech as being, yes, a bit entrepreneurial, yes, good communicators, yes, community engagement is strong. I was speaking at the Rotary Club a couple of weeks ago, and the fire chief, the head of the fire department, came up and he said, the programs that we have on architecture are the most interesting ones in Rotary Club. Well, that's community engagement. Yeah. So I think that it requires a longer conversation to know what's right for you. But there are strong options in professional practice at all sizes.
Yeah, what I always encourage students to do when they're in school is in the summertime to experiment. One summer, spend time in a small firm. The next summer, spend time in a medium or large size firm, just so you can get a sense of what works for you. I think in general, I've always run a small firm, and David and I both run small firms. In small firms, you're going to get exposed to a lot of stuff. You're going to be doing everything. In a larger firm, you're going to tend to get to do more in-depth work, but probably in a smaller area. In other words, you get put on a team for a specific project type, and so if you are interested at some point in opening your own firm, the experience you get in a small firm is invaluable because you learn everything. You're part of the day-to-day operations. You take out the trash, you design projects, you do everything because there's fewer people. So it's a very, very different experience. But I just encourage everybody to try both and see what works for you. Let me see if there's any other questions. Okay, here's another question. I once had a conversation with an architect that warned me against internships in places where you want to work because it is then hard for you to be in the profession to lose the stigma of being the intern, in quotes, the intern. Do y'all have thoughts regarding that perspective? That's a good question. David,
I can take that. I don't think that's the case. There's an example I could think of, a fellow who was an undergrad at Georgia Tech, who was an excellent student, who was an intern at our firm. He graduated and went to graduate school for 4 years, and we stayed in touch, and we promptly hired him, and he came back down to Atlanta and now works for us full time. And we don't think of him as the intern at all. He is a project architect and a project manager with a lot of experience, and he leads projects. So I don't think that stigma, I don't believe in it if you're always growing and open to new opportunities and you maintain those relationships, which is what it's about. There is, however, there is value to going away. If you do work at a firm and you go away and you get experience,
yep,
you are seen as more valuable to be hired back. That is true. But I don't think it comes with a stigma. That's what I would say.
Yeah. But it's a really good question, though, because but that should be on your radar. Because whether it's an intern position or not, even if you go into a firm after graduation, there are times when people get put in a position and they find it hard to get out. And I'll tell you just a story. When I was in college, not grad school, but college, I did an intern. I did it like literally a co-op program. So I would go to school one semester, and then I would work a semester, and go to school semester, and work a semester. And then after that, I went to work for this firm. Now, during my co-op period, I was a model maker. I built physical models. And, I was very ambitious. I really wanted to do the right thing. And I built some killer models. I'm telling you, I built great models. And I always thought, man, I'm doing such a great job. They keep giving me more models to build. I'm just, I'm building these beautiful models. And then when I graduated, I came in and I said, God, this guy can really make models. And I realized, wait a minute, I can do a lot more than make models. And so, I had to consciously say, okay, guys, look, I know I do good models, and I know they're very valuable, but I don't want to do models anymore. I want to do something else. And so you had to kind of make sure that you don't get in a rut. So that's a really good question, and you have to be careful about that no matter what.
Yeah, and to put a fine point on that, I would say you always have to be an advocate for your own career, even if it means having those difficult conversations with people who you work with or work for and say, listen, I feel stuck, or I want more.
One other thing to think about.
Yeah, Jim, go ahead.
That it just occurred to me, but the Georgia Tech graduates are skilled in various technologies. And when they go in for their internships, these skills are pretty impressive to the rest of the culture of a firm. And so a person can make themselves, in some ways, indispensable to the firm and to the future because of these technology skills that can run around some of the older professionals in a practice. So keep that in mind. There are a lot of things that the younger people have in their internships that earn them respect and continuing respect without a glass ceiling.
If I could add to that as well, I believe it's, it is true. There is no stigma in interning. I had interned with HKS Architects the summer before, and right before graduating, I was invited to apply to become a full-time employee. And HKS Architects is a large firm. It has over 26 offices around the world, and like they were explaining the differences between small and large firms, they're all true. And it is true. In a large firm, you get a deeper experience. Right now I'm working in the healthcare team and I'm working on code analysis. So that's what I'm focusing on for the past 4 weeks. However, like David said, you're in charge of your own career trajectory. And I'm really lucky that I'm with a firm that has a healthy culture, and they actually encourage you to speak up. So relationships are super important. You in a large firm, it's normal. Sometimes you may feel like a number, but if you establish a strong relationships with your principal, your office director, your project manager, then all it takes is just courage for you to go up and let them know this is where I would like to go. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be there to support you.
Okay, great. There are a couple of questions that I think I skipped that I want to quickly answer. Is the practicum program paid or unpaid? The practicum program is unpaid. And it's a week. Like I said, it's during spring break. And the reason it's unpaid is that it's really more about making a connection than it is doing actual work. What we find with the students is that they'll go to an office and they'll basically just shadow a design partner or somebody, a team. They'll go to job sites. They'll go to job meetings. They'll do a range of things. And so it's really less of a work week and more of a kind of an exposure and networking week. And so that's why we make the relationship with the firms that they don't have to pay. They don't have to pay the students. And the students are fine. It's really, and honestly, students also take time off from work to like go to a museum or do something else. So it's a very flexible relationship. But really, the most valuable thing, much more important than a week's worth of pay, is the connections that you make. That is the value that you get from the practicum program. And then there was one question about, can you also comment on the pay range for the MSUD students? My sense is that the MSUD students probably, because the MSUD is a post-professional degree, it's usually somebody's second professional degree. I would say that the pay range is comparable to the architect. I would guess with minimal or no experience, you're in the $50,000 to $55,000 a year range. I don't think it varies that much from architecture. David, I don't know if you have any insight on that.
No, I don't. Not on MSUD in particular. But I think that generally with a graduate degree from, top institutions such as Georgia Tech, you will be in the higher tiers of the range that's expected, no matter
Yep.
the degree.
Okay, so it looks like we're getting to the end, and I don't think there are any more questions. So,
Scott, there's one question that I think
okay.
is important, and Adriana, you might want to answer this one. Post the MArch graduation, when can one apply for registration to practice as an architect?
It's really up to you. David was explaining that, which is the case for most architects, they do wait until they have a couple of years of experience under their belt, and that may include like working in different kinds of firms, to have all kinds of experiences so that then you're ready to sit for the exams. However, some students, including myself, once we graduate, we start studying already. So if you prepare yourself very well and you stay dedicated, it is possible you can pass all 6 exams within 2 years after graduating and become licensed. But the important thing is that you need the hours first. So.
Yeah, just for perspective, I practiced for 5 years before I took the exams because it's just what was right for me. That's when I felt really, really ready. And it was 9 exams when I took them.
Yes.
So, it changes. But it's really when you're ready.
Yeah. And just to give my experience is that because I was working a lot during school, I think I took the exam all 9. I thought it was 9 or 12. I feel like it was 12. Maybe it was 12 when I did it because you did it later. But it was a lot. It was a full week. This was before it was digital. It starts to give a sense of how old I am. But I took it, I think, a year and a half after I graduated and passed all the exams in one sitting. So, I got registered very quickly after school. It's much more flexible now, though. You can take it at different times. And, so I think Adriana's right. It's really up to you. Jamie, do you want to add to that?
The trends are that the average age taking the exam is going down. And from what I've heard, I think that's right around age 28 now. And it used to be, in the 30s.
Okay, interesting. That makes sense. Okay, I think that we're at the end of the session, and let me just make sure if there's no new questions. No, there's not. So I'll just, maybe everybody can say a few departing words, but I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I know there's one more session at 1 o'clock that you'll want to get prepared for, but I know everybody is in that period of like looking at different schools and trying to decide where to go. And, I think our position at Georgia Tech is that we want you to make the right decision. If it's coming to Georgia Tech, that's what we want. But if it's going to another school, you have to assess that. And so what we're trying to do with all of these online virtual sessions is just to give you as much information as we can about what we're about. And so that's what's most important to us, is that you have a comprehensive understanding of Georgia Tech. It's been very complicated this year because you can't come to campus. But I can tell you, I've been to a lot of campuses around the country. Georgia Tech is a beautiful campus. Atlanta is a great city. You will not regret spending time in Atlanta at Georgia Tech. I can guarantee you that. If you haven't visited the campus, I know you're at a slight disadvantage, but it is a gorgeous campus and it's a great place to be. So I don't know if Adriana, David, if you guys want to say any departing words. Adriana?
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, Scott, exactly everything you said is just bringing me back. Like I loved my time in Atlanta. When I went to open house, of course, it was in person, and I fell in love with the campus. I really valued the kind of attention that was given to us. Coming in and having all of our questions answered. But beyond that, just seeing all the resources that Georgia Tech has to support your academic journey, it was really inspiring, and I don't regret it one bit. I learned so much from my professors that not only are great designers, but they're also practicing architects. So you know that you're being instructed by people who know what they're doing. And I could go on and on, but my advice for all of you is, make the best of it. The more you put yourself out there, the more enriching of an experience you're going to have, whether it's, becoming active in student organizations or doing your best in school, or even, putting yourself out there and meeting people that are professionals. It's, just take advantage.
David?
I would say just two quick things. One of the things that I really enjoy about Georgia Tech is the size of the school. Yeah. It's the right size. It's not too small and it's not too big. You don't feel like you're part of a large cohort. By the time, and Adriana, I think you can speak to this, by the time that you get done with your career, you know all the professors. I know everybody in the graduating class every year because they've passed through my studio and I've sat on their reviews. And that's a real asset. The other thing I'd say is after this is over, feel free to reach out to us. Send us an email, ask any questions you have individually. We'd be happy to answer them. Our email addresses are on the website, so we welcome that.
Great. Jim, any last words?
I've had the opportunity to visit every accredited school of architecture in the country. And I do hear you, Scott, when you say it's a beautiful campus. And, a lot of people don't think, well, that's one of the reasons that we go to Georgia Tech, but it's true, and it's a good reason. And there is a community, and that campus environment is a pretty special place. And the networking on campus, we talked about Practicum and other firms that we're going to be linking up with and sharing ideas, but the network on campus in the business school and in construction management and elsewhere is pretty rich. So I encourage people to think about that. And the world is changing. We don't know exactly how to define what it's going to look like in 2 years and 3 years from now. But we do know that there's going to be an expanding profession. It's going to be of increasing relevance. That's going to happen in ways that will be defined, I think, by today's students. I think Georgia Tech is a great place to study.
Great. All right, so we'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Hopefully you got all your questions answered, but if not, as David said, feel free to reach out to us. Okay, so long. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.